if you have one hand, there's one, and one eye, here's another one, you can do it wherever you go. It's not that hard. And here's all the things you have to do. At each meal, simply divide your plate into 3 equal sections. That can't be too hard. On 1/3 of the plate, you put some low-fat protein. How much? The amount you can put in the palm of your hand. I notice that's also the thickness of the palm of your hand, just in case you're making Dagwood sandwiches. Now, what about the other 2/3 of the plate? Oh, what type of proteins do we want? Well, low-fat choices, things like turkey, fish, chicken, egg whites, low-fat cottage cheese, very lean cuts of red meat. And for vegetarians, tofu and soy imitation meat products. You've got a pretty wide variety to work with. Now that you've done that, you want to balance the rest of the plate with carbohydrates. You're probably saying, well, that says fruits and vegetables. They aren't carbohydrates. Well, actually they are. They're carbohydrates that have color. The more color you put in your plate, the more you can control inflammation. Conversely, the less color you put in your plate, the more pasta, the more bread, the more starches. You're not going to not be able to control inflammation. You're going to actually increase inflammation. And what are typical carbohydrates? Well, the good choices are most fruits and most fiber-rich vegetables and selected grains like oatmeal. They have a much lower insulin response. The really poor choices, which have a higher insulin response, are things like pasta, breads, and cereals, and potatoes, and rice, and bananas, and raisins, and peas and corn. Except for the peas and corn, this is what athletes eat. Why? It's easy. But they can perform so much better just by taking the white things off the plate and replacing it with colorful carbohydrates. And here's the good part. You've got to add fat because this helps reduce insulin secretion. But there's 2 types of fat. The good fat, things like monounsaturated fat. Now, where do you find this? Things like olive oil, slivered almonds, or guacamole. And the really bad fat, this is high in a certain fatty acid. It's called arachidonic acid. And this is the building block of inflammatory hormones. And where do you find this? Fatty red meat and egg yolks. If you're trying to control inflammation, making your diet rich in fatty red meat and egg yolks doesn't make a lot of sense, being an athlete or a non-athlete. Now, what do these zone meals look like? Well, there's a couple of examples. Here's one example from Italy. Here's the entree. There's the chicken, and here you have the asparagus, and you have now what looks like rice is actually barley, and you've got tomatoes, and you've got a bowl of strawberries, and since these are Italian zone meals, a glass of wine. The body treats wine just like a carbohydrate. So what you've done, you've taken the meal and balanced it. But the first thing you notice, there's a lot of color on the plate. The second thing you notice, these are not meals of deprivation. Here's another Italian zone meal. What do you see? Lots of color. You don't see too many white things there. And you see fruits, and here's an obligatory glass of white wine. Now, if you don't like wine, that's fine. Just have 2 servings extra of vegetables. Grilled vegetables be a great source. And finally, this is a little darker. That's red wine there, not surprisingly. But again, what you see is color, color, color. I think you get the picture here. Have a lot of color in your plate. Eat adequate amounts of protein. To set in motion hormones. Hormones are powerful. If you can orchestrate them, your ability to control your athletic performance is dramatically increased. Now, if you do all this, you get what I call your zone food pyramid. At the base, you're eating lots of colored carbohydrates, fruits and vegetables. And you're eating adequate levels, but not excessive levels, of low-fat protein, things like chicken and fish. And you're adding a lot of olive oil to your meals. And up to this point, the zone diet sounds suspiciously like the Mediterranean diet. And it has many shared components. The only difference is, it's a small one, in that in the zone diet, you're eating a lot less grains and starches and making up for it by eating a lot more fruits and vegetables. That one seemingly small change has tremendous amounts of hormonal amplification factors. In many ways, you should consider the Zone diet to be the evolution of the Mediterranean diet. It takes a good diet and makes it superior. Now, if you compare the Zone diet, which I call the battle of the food pyramids, to the USDA diet, or the American Heart Association diet, or the Athletic Performance diet, it doesn't matter, they're all the same. What you see, they're both pyramids. And basically, that's where any type of similarity stops. Because if I've said anything so far, you can see that if you're eating lots of grains and starches, this is probably not good for your health or your athletic performance, because you're making too much of the hormone insulin, and if you're adding a lot of vegetable oils, which are ubiquitous in our society, that combined with excess insulin will increase inflammation. Now, it's one thing for me to say the Zone diet is an anti-inflammatory diet. You say, okay, what does somebody else who has some credentials say about the Zone as an anti-inflammatory diet? Well, let's go to Harvard Medical School. You know, they're pretty well known. This is a study they did about, now nearly 5 years ago, comparing the Zone diet to the USDA diet, which is also basically the diet for the American Heart Association and the diet recommended to all athletes. The Zone seems to be 9 times more effective than this diet right here. This is the diet recommended to every cardiovascular patient in America. It's recommended to every athlete in America. Yet, in reducing inflammation, it doesn't do very much compared to the Zone diet. Now, what about the other extreme? Looking at something like the Atkins diet. You know, eat all the protein you want, just don't eat any carbohydrates. This is a study we published about 3 years ago. We could look at another marker of inflammation, and on the Atkins diet, this doubles within 6 weeks. On the Zone diet, it drops. And what's the worst thing for an athlete? To be constantly inflamed. So, at the extremes, the high protein diet or the high carbohydrate diet, neither one is very good for controlling inflammation. What seems to be the best, if we basically trust published data in the literature, a diet that's moderate in protein, moderate in carbohydrate, moderate in fat, another name for the Zone diet. And the key aspects of the Zone diet is based on the glycemic load. Again, you don't eat too many carbohydrates, but not too little. It's based on a balance of protein, carbohydrate, and fat. There's no one evil boogeyman to avoid. You need a balance. And what's driving interest? If you follow this diet, it's a diet without hunger. Whether you're an athlete or non-athlete, think of how easy your life would be without hunger. It'd be a lot easier. You're not always looking around where the next meal is coming from. It's flexible. You can eat virtually whatever you want, as long as you try to balance protein, carbohydrate, and fat. And as I'll show you shortly, it's not that hard. And it's a moderate approach, which means you can do it for a lifetime. And the implications is, if you can do it for a lifetime, you'll have long-term compliance, and it's medically validated. Every carefully controlled study that's ever compared the Zone diet to every other diet known to mankind has shown the following conclusions. That basically the Zone diet is superior in insulin control, superior in blood sugar control, superior in blood lipid control, superior in appetite suppression, superior in fat loss, and I've already shown you superior in control of inflammation. I'm not a greedy guy. I'm just asking for one study under carefully controlled conditions to show any other diet is as good as the Zone diet in controlling things which are important, especially for athletic performance.